All right, so this is our exercise science 335 CLC. My name's Alexis.
My name is Brianna.
I'm Carson.
And I'm Cassandra.
Okay, phases of movement. The first phase is the approach angle. The second phase is plantation of the opposite foot. The next phase is swing, which is the limb loading. This involves hip extension while knee is in flexion, while plantar flexion. Next is contact with the ball, and then follow through. And this involves flexion at the hip while extension at the knee, while slight dorsiflexion. Oh.
Our sport is soccer. So soccer was established in the 1600s. It was known as football before. Soccer consists of 2 teams, each team consisting of 11 players each. The main objective for the game is to manipulate the ball using different techniques to score the ball into the opposing team's goal. So it is known for the combinations of speed, agility, and skills by using the legs, head, and torso to maneuver the ball across the field. And this is going to be our demonstration of the soccer strike.
The movement that we chose to do is an athlete performing a soccer kick.
Okay, so some common injuries that result from faulty movement can include ankle sprains. The ligaments that are around the ankle are at a common risk of tears because of the motion. Lateral ankle sprains can occur when the soccer kicks the ball on the top of their foot. Medial ankle sprains occur when the toes turn out while the foot is flexed upward. A groin pull can occur when the soccer player kicks the ball with too much force, and a hamstring strain can occur due to the quick change from contraction to a length position.
So our literature review, an analysis of a soccer kick starts with the extension of the hip and then knee flexion. What literature notes as important is that the difference between an experienced player and a beginner is that an experienced player will also include rotation of the trunk whenever they go to kick. And then obviously the follow through is the hip flexion, the knee extension, and then slight ankle dorsiflexion at contact. EMGs show us that there's a 63 to 128% of maximal voluntary contraction of the agonist muscles. So that's our quads. But what's really fascinating is that our biceps femoris and our hamstrings reach around 36. So that just lets us know and confirms that the hamstrings not only stabilize knee extension, but also slow down the knee. And because of that, and because we're doing it so quickly in a soccer kick, repeatedly throughout a soccer game, that could lead to hamstring strains. But fortunately enough, there are a lot of literature reviewed exercises that can prevent and strengthen hamstrings, such as eccentric exercises like lunges, deadlifts, those sorts of things, along with a Nordic curl, which is what that guy's doing right there. All of them have been shown to prevent hamstring injuries. So we briefly touched on this and just go through it again, but these are our phases of the soccer kick with the approach, the planting of the foot, the swinging or the loading phase, and then the initiation of hip flexion with the follow through, the trunk rotation, knee extension, and then foot contact, and then the final follow through. And then just briefly, that bottom picture there, the top skeleton is a professional soccer player, and then the bottom is a more beginner. And so it's just to note that, as you can see with the top, they have the arms for stabilization and allows for a lot more balance. So the breakdown of a specific phase are basically the last 3 phases, because this is where we see potentially the most injury. Starting with the picture C there, we see that the hamstring, the knee is bent, it is in flexion, and the hip is extended. And then at the end, in picture E there, we see the knee is extended and the hip is flexed. So what that is doing is we're taking our hamstring from like a really shortened position to a really lengthened position really fast. And as we mentioned before, the hamstring is responsible for slowing down the knee. So when we're taking it from a shortened to lengthened position, and it's responsible for slowing down the knee, just leads to, or there's just a higher risk for a potential injury there. And then lastly, our full body review of a soccer kick, we start with the planted leg, all of which the knee, the ankle, and the hip are all slightly flexed to absorb the planting and the body weight. The pelvis obviously is going to go through hip flexion and extension. However, specifically, it's going to go from a posterior tilt to an anterior tilt with the elevation on the kicking side. And then the knee, obviously, is just going to go through a simple flexion to extension with our hamstring slowing down so that we don't hyperextend. And our ankle is going to be plantar flexed throughout the majority of the kick. It's only at the contact where we're going to have slight dorsiflexion. And then notably, especially for professional players, the arms play a huge role in stabilizing, specifically the non-kicking side arm. It's going to be abducted and horizontally extended, as that has been found to provide the most balance.
Okay, so all joints in the joints motions that occur during a soccer kick include the hip joint during the preparatory phase. Before the kick, there is hip extension and even hyperextension. During the kicking phase, it is hip flexion. The knee joint is also involved. During the preparatory phase, it is a knee flexion. During the kicking phase, it transitions to knee extension. And then the talocrular joint, which is the ankle joint. During preparatory phase, it is in plantar flexion and continues into the kicking phase.
All right, so for an injury, I chose the knee joint, which is the tibiofemoral joint. One injury that I found research on was knee osteoarthritis in male professional soccer players. It was a ratio objectively ascertained osteoporosis of the knee was 2.25, which is a 95% confidence interval. The movement of this injury is knee extension and knee flexion, and also includes slight knee internal and external rotation. The joint type is a synovial hinge joint.
Okay, so the planes of movement that a soccer kick goes through. When kicking the soccer ball, the leg that is swinging to do the kick occurs along the sagittal plane. And there's also slight movement along the transverse plane if there's any rotation that occurs throughout the entire body. The muscles that are included during the preparatory phase to provide hip extension, the agonist is the gluteus maximus, and the synergist is the gluteus minimus, and then the antagonist, which is working against it, is the psoas major. For knee flexion, the agonist is the hamstrings, which includes the biceps femoris, semimembranosus, and tendinosus. The synergist is the iliotibial band, and then the agonist is the quadriceps, which includes rectus femoris, vastus medialis, vastus lateralis, and vastus intermedialis. For the kicking phase, to perform knee extension, the agonists are the quadriceps muscles again. The synergist does not exist because it is an open kinetic chain movement. The agonist is the hamstrings. To perform plantar flexion, the agonist is the gastrocnemius, the synergist is the soleus, and the antagonist is the tibialis anterior. And for hip flexion, the agonist is the iliopsoas. The synergists include the rectus femoris and TFL, and the antagonist is the gluteus maximus.
And some joint articulations for the hip joint. It's the pelvis and femur, which connects the hip to the femur. The knee joint, which involves the tibia, fibula, and patella. It's connecting the upper leg to the lower leg. And then the talocrural joint involves the tibia, fibula, and talus, which is connecting the lower leg to the foot.
So common injuries in soccer. So the most common areas for injuries in soccer consist of the hamstrings, the groin, the knees, ankles, and calves. As stated before, the top 3 common injuries are ankle sprains, groin pull, and hamstrings. A lot of these injuries are caused mainly from direct trauma by either colliding with other players or improper landing positions during a jump, all mainly focused in the lower extremities. So the ideal technique for the soccer strike, the main objective is to strike the center of the ball. The torso should be upright over the ball. This is to prevent the action foot from going underneath the ball. The opposing foot should be planted on the floor facing the direction that the player wants the ball to go in. This is for stabilization as well as to act as a guide for the action leg to follow through. And then the third tip should be ankles should be locked in plantar flexion motion, which is going to be the action foot to allow maximum force to be applied directly to the center of the ball. Some exercises to improve performance in soccer. These exercises are all aimed at speed, agility, and stabilization. So the first one we have listed is the front squat. This is going to improve the power output during the strike. We have abdominal rows. This is improving core stabilization. And then we have shuttle runs, which will aim at the agility and speed in change of direction for the sport. Lastly, these are our references.